I met a woman, open the car door, turn the gap in the car, slaughtering the gap.
You met the woman?
Oh, you open the car door, turn the gap in the grass and slaughtering the gap.
Slaughtering the gap?
Yes, my one.
She's standing on the side of the coal tar, and I'm standing there doing this with the jack thing. And next thing I know, a motorbike comes out of nowhere and hits her, and she goes into a ditch, because right after this coal tar is like a little extra coal tar on the side of the coal tar. Right after that is just a big ditch.
Okay. Welcome back, guys. I trust you are fine and you are having a great Saturday. Today's true crime story is coming to you from Liberia on the African continent. This true crime story is very unique. It's just about 24 hours old, and it's unique because it involves a missionary, a Christian missionary, allegedly American, and a Liberian national who turns out to have gotten married to this American national, who himself is married to an alleged American who is also a co-missionary. And then the love turned sour, and at a point in time, the American missionary, just hours before his departure from Liberia, decided that he had to end the life of this Liberian girl. What was his motive? And is that even the true story? Because there is a second narrative that has come up based on the testimony of this so-called American national missionary after he was apprehended by a mob who allegedly caught him in the act of trying to behead the lady. So there are two theories out here. We are going to get into each of the theories, and then maybe we can begin to make headway as to what the true narrative is. Because as it stands now, the victim at the center of the issue, the Liberian national lady, is yet to speak. So the two narratives are the narrative coming from the mob and the narrative coming from the suspect, the American missionary by name Lucas Richard, as against what he is alleged to have been attempting to do to the Liberian national by name Jessica Lloyd. We get into the story now. Enter Lucas Richard, a member of the Creekside Church and a missionary running a mission by name the Indigenous Mission. Now, if you go to Facebook, you will see Lucas Richard on his Facebook handle had indicated that he is part of this mission, and his role is the director of administration of this indigenous mission, and their goal is missionaries serving the Lord in Liberia, West Africa. It's on his Facebook page, and you can see the screenshot of it here. This is honorable. As a fellow African, I've learned from my history that years ago, even over centuries ago, missionaries settled in Africa. They've impacted our lives in one way or the other. Some good, some allegedly bad. They've impacted with Christianity and other great things. So it's not abnormal to have missionaries still around trying to do some good work. So it's honorable work. They settled in Liberia and they got their job running. They've been around, per my research, since about 2016 coming. So they've done some work in Liberia. They've built schools to help the community and all. So Lucas Richard and his indigenous mission were actually doing some good work. Now, fast forward, enter the would-be alleged victim, Jessica Lloyd. The story so far, per the first narrative, is that Lucas Richard, in the course of his missionary duties in Liberia, met and fell in love with this Liberian girl by name Jessica Lloyd. It is also important to note that Lucas Richard is actually married. He is married to a fellow American lady who goes by the name Lois Richard, allegedly, per the narrative out there. So Lucas Richard is married to Lois Richard. Now, after being married to Lois Richard and allegedly co-running the indigenous mission with Lois Richard in various capacities, Lucas Richard found himself developing feelings for this Liberian girl by name Jessica Lloyd. So what does he do? He decides to go about it in the missionary or the appropriate manner. Of course, appropriate in quotes. The narrative out there, and this has been confirmed by Jessica Lloyd's mom, whom we will still get to hear from in this video. The narrative is that Lucas Richard actually, after approaching Jessica Lloyd and having her accept his proposal, then went on to introduce himself to the mother of Jessica Lloyd and went on again to tell her about his intentions to marry Jessica Lloyd. He even went on to confess to Jessica Lloyd's mom that he himself is actually married and that his wife is alive but is very old and they are having issues, and his wife understands the need for him to get married to a second wife and she blesses it. So that is the seemingly honorable approach that Lucas Richard took. Bear in mind, he is a missionary. So you would see from a third point of view that if you are standing back and watching, it seems like this man doesn't have any evil intentions. He has laid all his cards on the table. He's not trying to hide anything. Or was he? Well, I'll pause here and chip in my 2 cents. I think he was. With all this seeming transparency, one thing that he hid was the consent of his wife as far as this endeavor was concerned, and whether or not she truly approved of it or even knew of it in the first place. Because I think that if she did, she should have been part of the conversation. She should have spoken for herself. And that is the due diligence I think that Jessica Lloyd and her mom failed to do. That was very key. And I think they failed in that aspect, especially Jessica Lloyd's mom. You don't just take the word of a married man on behalf of his wife when he is so desperate and eager to get in bed with your daughter and allegedly marry her. So I think the mom failed in that regard. I'm not judging, but that is the fact. There should have been more due diligence so you know the situation your daughter is getting into. Now, fast forward. Jessica Lloyd's mom agreed. She agreed despite this lack of judgment I just talked about. She agreed. Without hearing from Lucas Richards' husband, Jessica Lloyd's mom agreed to Lucas Richards' proposal to marry his daughter. Someone would say, what the hell? But before you go in that direction, let me chip in an African perspective in some countries. If you are a bit familiar with what goes on in Africa, you would get to know that traditionally, and this is not in all countries, dare I say, or all cultures, African, dare I say, but in some African cultures and traditions, it is not a problem for a woman to be married to become a second wife to a man. In which case, there would be a first wife who hasn't been divorced, and this woman who has been newly married will now take a position as a second wife. It's quite normal in some African cultures. So, in case you are watching from a part of the world where this is strange, just understand that this is more of a cultural thing in some African countries. So, it wasn't new. Jessica Lloyd herself knew the man is married. His mom knew, and they approved because it's not a strange thing to them. But like I said, where they failed, in my view, is the fact that they never got to talk to the wife of Lucas Richard by name Lois Richard. So this is all the preamble and the genesis as to how come eventually Lucas Richard, the missionary who had come to Liberia to spread the word of God and bring people closer to Christ, was now going to marry a second wife. Fast forward, there are rumors that they got married. Jessica Lloyd's mom actually, in her interview, goes on to say they got married. But then Lucas Richard, allegedly refutes that. He actually goes on to claim when he was arrested later on that he didn't even know Jessica that personally, allegedly. But we are digging into that, and you can trust there's going to be an update to the story. So fast forward, they allegedly got married and they started doing what married people do. And then, as is expected, Jessica Lloyd got pregnant. According to her mom, Jessica informed her that she was pregnant, and obviously Lucas Richard was responsible. They went to the hospital, did some checks, and this was confirmed. Lucas Richard seemed happy with the pregnancy, but my question is, was he really happy? Unknown to Jessica Lloyd and her mom, it turns out that the wife of Lucas Richard was never aware he was going to marry a second wife. Neither did she at any point in time give her blessings that he has the freedom and her blessings to do so. So Lucas Richard, the missionary spreading the word of Christ, had come in to lie to Jessica Lloyd and her mom and gotten them to give Jessica Lloyd to him to marry and impregnate. So then the story begins to look like a man who had sexual urges and was lusting after a woman and didn't want to do it in a secret manner because there could be tendencies or issues, but rather decided that he was going to go about it in a manner where he would seem legitimate and treat the whole thing in a legitimate manner, and then have the green light to always have his way with this lady. So the plot was now unraveling, and it looks like his wife wasn't happy, and fire was brewing in the home of Lucas Richard, because it turns out that his wife, Lois Richard, was actually alleged to be around in Liberia as well, contrary to what Lucas Richard had said. So it now meant that Lucas Richard had gotten himself in a very deep shit. And if it wasn't bad enough that he had gotten traditionally married to this African lady whilst he is still married to his wife, it would get worse if this African lady is to actually give birth for him. And now here is the case, Jessica Lloyd is also pregnant. You see where the conversation is going. So what does Lucas Richard do? The missionary, or may I add, the Christian missionary, here to serve the Lord in Liberia, West Africa, with the position of being the director of administration of the indigenous mission, which also is allegedly affiliated to the Creekside Church, begins to now allegedly plan an abortion without the knowledge or consent of Jessica Lloyd, the woman he has secretly now married and impregnated in Liberia. That is how cunning and wicked the missionary has now become. So just like that, the man who is supposed to spread the word of God is now in bed as a devil. What does he do? Again, according to Jessica Lloyd's mom, Jessica informed her that Lucas Lloyd had actually injected her with some concoctions which he allegedly said would make her better and also stronger to carry the baby to full term, but actually ended up making her miscarry the child. Just like that, Jessica had lost her pregnancy. And who wins in this situation? Nobody but Lucas Richard. And if you ask me, that was the first murder. The murder of the baby. Even with this, they were still together. Although Jessica was not happy, Lucas Richard was still struggling and doing his best to make amends. But at this point, I'm thinking he would now be looking for an exit strategy because, mind you, he didn't do it mistakenly. It seems there was a method to this, especially with his actual wife, the American, breathing down his neck. Per the reports, fast forward, Lucas Richard was scheduled on a flight to leave Liberia for the United States on the 14th of September 2023. And at this point, he had caused the abortion or the miscarriage of Jessica LLoyd's kid, and he was trying to make amends. He went to the home of Jessica LLoyd, who was still with her mom, and they started talking. The mom at this point was preparing to go to church, and then, according to her, she left them and went, thinking they would sort things out. They kept talking, and then they got into Lucas Richard's Toyota 4x4 vehicle and drove off. This is where the whole thing gets extra dangerous and shady. They got to a part of the road with some bushes and some thickets. And at this point, we now zoom in to the narrative of the mob. This mob is the mob that apprehended Lucas Richard and brought him to the police station in Liberia. This is what the mob said, and the narrative of the mob is being spearheaded by a moto rider. Now, this commercial motorcyclist says that when he was riding by the roadside at this portion with the thicket and the bushes, he saw Lucas Richard, the white man, in his narrative, now dragging the woman, Jessica LLoyd, who is the Liberian national, into the bush and then bringing out a knife and proceeding to try to slit her throat, literally. So it was at this point that he, the motorcyclist, raised an alarm and then jumped into the bush and hit Lucas Richard on the back of the head and started fighting him just so he would prevent him from taking the life of Jessica LLoyd. Take note of this account because we will look at the picture of Jessica LLoyd after she was rescued, and you would see that how she looks and the injury underneath her chin on her throat seems to fall in line perfectly with the account of this commercial motorbike rider. Now, upon his alarm, as he was fighting Lucas Richard, other people joined in, and it's moved now to become a mob action, where fortunately they didn't lynch Lucas Richard, but rather rescued Jessica LLoyd from him and then conveyed Lucas Richard to the police station. And it is at this point that the case then went to the next level. At the police station, they gave the account of what they saw, and the police then also decided to interrogate Lucas Richard for his side of the story. And here comes the second narrative. According to Lucas Richard, he was in his vehicle with Jessica LLoyd when he had a flat tire. So he got out of the vehicle to work on the flat tire and told Jessica to get out, pick a vehicle and head home because he had gone to buy her cornflakes and other stuff as a parting gift, costing about $150. So he asked her to get out of his vehicle and pick a motorcycle home whilst he works on the vehicle. Sounds honorable, right? So, according to him, at this point, Jessica got out of the vehicle, but then she got hit by a motorcycle and she fell into that part of the bush, hitting her head. And as he was trying to revive her, he got attacked by this mob. I'll leave his testimony video after this video. It follows, so don't end it, so you get to hear from him himself. It's fair you hear what he said directly, but in a nutshell, that's what he was saying. But if I put what he's saying side by side with how Jessica looks, and you are seeing how Jessica looks, you would see that it's not consistent. Just for the purpose of YouTube's graphic content policy, we've had to cancel out the injury on her neck. But you can go on Facebook, you see this, and you will see that what I'm saying is true. The injuries on Jessica LLoyd's neck are consistent with the account given by the commercial motorcycle rider and not the account given by Lucas Richard. So that is the story as it is now. But then, as this story was unfolding, just few hours into the story, Creekside Church went on their Facebook handle and put out a post saying, "Please pray for Creekside supported missionaries Lucas and Lois Richard. Lucas was attacked and robbed in Liberia today. His phone and money were stolen and their vehicle damaged. We'll add more details as we learn them. Thank you." This is also consistent with the account that Lucas Richard was saying, because according to him, he was attacked and his wallet containing about $350 was stolen, along with other things he had on him, and his vehicle was vandalized. I saw the picture of the vehicle. The glasses were broken though, but it doesn't look so vandalized. But again, I will be quick to say that I am not proceeding or attempting to judge who is lying in this case, because in such cases, the story might make sense or an account might make sense, but it does not necessarily mean it's true. So the fact that the injuries of Jessica LLoyd are consistent with what the motorcycle rider said does not necessarily mean that Lucas Richard is lying. I will leave that to the police. That's why there's the need for investigations. And when the story broke, the initial report was that Jessica LLoyd had died as a result of her throat being cut by Lucas Richard. But my investigations later revealed that Jessica LLoyd had actually survived. So unlike typical murder cases where the dead can't speak for themselves, in this case, the victim-to-be or the victim didn't lose her life. She's alive and she is going to speak for herself. I'm chasing this story. As soon as she speaks, I know everything is going to become clear, and that is what the next update is going to bring, along with what investigators would have also found to that point, because she will speak for herself and she will speak to the issue. I have a video of her being treated at the hospital, but I can't show that here because of Facebook's graphic content policy. But I just mentioned that so you know she's actually okay. There's video evidence confirming that she's okay and she's being treated. And I know that when she speaks, the truth is going to come out. And then we'll look at the next line of action. But if you ask me, this is what I'll say. I'll first take it from the spiritual realm and I'll say, Lucas Richard has fallen. Irrespective of whether he is guilty of trying to murder her, the mere fact that you are married and you came and lasted after another woman and you went about a sneaky way to get married to her without the knowledge and consent of your wife is in itself victory for the same devil you are here in Africa trying to fight as a missionary. And I think that is a disgrace. Whilst he was struggling or trying so hard to do the right thing, he himself has fallen prey to the same devil he claims to be fighting. And you begin to wonder if this is his first time or this is not his first time, but this is the first time he's been caught? I think that is also a good question. And then I'm conducting an investigation to get proof of the fact that they actually got married, that Lucas Richard actually married Jessica Lloyd. Because here in Africa, you don't necessarily need to go and do the court type of marriage where you sign off and other stuff to be married. You can get married traditionally, and that is also legal here. So depending on the legalities of marriage in whichever part of the world you are watching this, you may need to stick around for the next update where I'll find the evidence. That is a promise. I'll find the evidence of their marriage, if they did, and bring it in my next update to show that truly they were married. And if that's the case, there are several far-reaching implications here. It means that Lucas Richard didn't just try to take the life, or let me say allegedly, didn't just try to take the life of any other woman or just some random woman he had slept with, but he rather tried to take the life of his wife. And that is huge. And at this point, my heart goes out to his actual first wife, Lois Richard, because he has put her in a very bad spot. He has dragged her name through the mud, and it's unprovoked. I don't know the case or the history between them, but you don't do that on this level. You don't do that on this level. And just like that, because he couldn't control his sexual urges as a Christian missionary, this man's lust has caused a very great damage to his wife, and is going to get worse. And it's even rubbing off on the Creekside Church, especially with the post they've put out. If it comes out that Lucas Richards' account of what happened is false, it puts a dent on the integrity of the church as well. And you know what churches stand for: truth, integrity, and the light. So this case has far-reaching implications and could even affect how other missionaries who are already around are going to be viewed, and those who would come in new are going to be welcomed. I'll be following this case like I promised, and the updates will be coming. Stick around, subscribe if you are yet to do so. Keep an eye out, like I've been saying, and I'll catch you next time. So now, just follow and watch the testimony of Lucas Richard when he was brought to the police station.
Explain exactly what happened on the scene. Explain exactly what happened and how you came here. Yeah, I'm listening to you. Go ahead.
Okay. The only thing, I don't know the police officer's names involved, but you guys can figure that out.
Okay.
She asked me to help her with $150 US,
Okay.
which I do monthly. I went there to her parents' house after I ran a few errands in town. I think you have some of my receipts over there.
Okay.
I go and I give her the $150. She gives it to her mom. Her brother was there too. She asked me for milk, cornflakes, and a few other things. And so the two of us went from right there. They live around something shop junction. And I carried her to Harbell supermarket. We bought cornflakes, we bought all of those things. And even if the receipts are gone right now, you can even ask Harbell, they can show you footage of us going in there together. Why would I be buying these things for someone I was going to hurt? Then from there, we decided that I could drop her. I don't have to take her back to her parents, and that I could drop her there because of Barneyville Highway. She would get a motorbike and she would get back. So I pulled the car. The first area where there was like coal tar that you could pull off on the main coal tar, I pull off. I put my trafficators on. Because two things. She's getting a motorbike to go back home, and I needed to check my back right tire because I've been having a problem with that tire. And I could feel when I was driving that something was not correct. So while she was waiting for motorbike, standing on the coal tar, I'm down there literally trying to jack up my thing.
Okay. So you went for her to her house.
Yes.
You took her to the supermarket.
Yes.
Your boy where your friend buying.
Right.
So in our direction, she was getting on bike to go back home.
No, after the supermarket, we drove for small time election. Then she said she would take motorbike to go home. Because, I mean, the cornflakes and everything fit inside plastic.
Her parents know you.
Yes.
Her parents knows you.
Yo.
Huh?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Because I asked their blessing, and when we were starting to have a relationship, but going back to the story, she's standing on the side of the coal tar, and I'm standing there doing this with the jack thing, and next thing I know, a motorbike comes out of nowhere and hits her, and she goes into a ditch, because right after this coal tar is like a little extra coal tar on the side of the coal tar. Right after that is just a big ditch.
Okay.
The motorbike hit her, she fell backwards and rolled into that ditch. I think she even fell backwards and hit the edge of the coal tar because she had blood coming. But she rolled backwards into there. At that point, I leave what I'm doing and I go to check on her and help her out and ask her if she's okay. I bring her up onto the coal tar. And at this point, this motorbike driver that just hit her is yelling out to other motorbikes, KK, whatever that's driving by, and this big lorry, big red truck that was carrying, I don't know, a dump out truck, something like that, telling them that I hurt the girl, that I did something to the girl. I don't know how they were saying, but they were yelling it out, screaming it out, and so they're stopping, and then all these motorbike guys are stopping, and they're vexed at me. I'm walking around the front to go get in the car. She was walking around the front with me. She goes around the front, and she's coming to get in the car. Then something goes through the window and comes and hits me right here on the head. And when it hit me, I did like this on the steering wheel. And one of the guys took a big stick and started pounding. He came in front of the Land Cruiser and he started pounding on the thing. And so at this point, she's telling me to go. She would be okay as me then, because they think they're probably going to get money from me. I had $400 US in my pocket. No, 350, because I gave her 150. I had $350 US in my pocket right here and some small in my wallet right here. It was becoming so bad, and the truck believed that I was doing something wrong, so he was wanting to stop me. She's telling me go, and everything that I've heard about motorbike drivers in Liberia is that if something happens, you will always run, especially if you're from outside, because they think they can get money from you. So I hit the gas and I start going. I didn't hit nobody. I even hit, before I put it in gear, I did like this so that they backed up. And then I went. And of course the motorbikes were following me. And the motorbike that hit her already had his motorbike out of the something. All I remember is that it was a red motorbike with a license plate in front. That's all I remember about it. But when they started following me, and I didn't know where to do. The only thing I knew was go to the first police officer that I could see.
Okay.
So what a relationship between this guy and you?
So I get to the first area where there's a police officer. And that police officer was so scared because he got hit with the same things they were chunking at me. They busted all my windows. You go look at that Land Cruiser. They busted all my windows.
I saw it.
They hit that police officer. He told me to keep going to the next police. He was going to try to stop these people.
Okay.
But that didn't work. Finally, when I reached to the I don't remember the exact how you call that area, but that goes on to the Walla. The police officer came and said, let me drive. Sorry, I'm still bleeding from this.